apologies. Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment, and obviously to Brendan as the Vice Chair. And good luck in those roles. I'm sure you'll be outstanding. And I just want to echo your remarks with regards to Edgar, Jardine, Janet Gray, and obviously I know Mike will also be leaving us with regards to all of the work that they've done to support the PSNI through their role on the board, and obviously welcome the new board members. I know we have Marion here today, we have Tommy, and we have a Derby County supporter, I understand, joining the board, which I should declare a conflict of interest in Patrick Nelson. I assume he's coming back from the game last night, which was a disappointing draw. I will keep my remarks as brief as I can, but because there is a new compilation of the board, I do just want to reinforce, and because of the current timing of the budget setting in Northern Ireland for public services, I can't, I'm afraid, miss this opportunity to talk about some of the funding challenges, but I'll seek to do it as succinctly as I can. Firstly, the forward that I provided to you gives again a sense of the diversity and the breadth of challenge faced by the PSNI, which is almost unique in policing in the United Kingdom. We've had a busy operational period since the last board meeting. There's mention in the board report of the visit, a 2-day visit of Queen Camilla to Northern Ireland. Visits of that nature of VIPs and royalty are not unusual. The deployment of 50 officers to London to support the Metropolitan Police in their Operation Brox, which is the pro-Palestine demonstrations in London, which have caused huge challenges for policing in GB. And of course here, we have had the Easter period where there were close to 80 parades that we had to police. This is, another of the unique elements that we have to deal with in Northern Ireland. I do want to put on record my thanks for all of those stakeholders, community members, partners who worked with my officers and staff in making sure that those parades and those events went off relatively peacefully. I do just want to put a context there. In advance of the parades, a huge amount of work went in working together to look at innovative ways to try to avoid what has unfortunately happened in recent years, which is disorder and scenes that none of us want to see in Northern Ireland. I looked at the backdrop of 2022, where we had several hours of disorder with petrol bombs and projectiles thrown at police officers. Last year, in an unnotified parade in the Cregan area, we had petrol bombs and masonry thrown at officers, and even more sinisterly and worryingly, a number of pipe bombs were discovered. There was, I think it's fair to say, and I spoke to a number of community members personally, frustration at the policing operation last year. A significant amount of work went in, and we've got Bobby Singleton here today. Bobby did a huge amount of work with the community. We did some innovative discussions with the Public Prosecution Service about how we deal with the legal requirements we have to notify people who are in breach of public order offences. And on the Easter Monday events, we used a drone for the first time to provide the announcements that are required to warn people with regards to offences they might be committing. You might remember last year there were scenes of police Land Rovers being petrol bombed and risked to officers. And we want to take away that opportunity for almost the inspiring by dissident Republicans of young people to react in a violent way against the police. That was hugely successful. What is incredibly disappointing is that I know, probably because of certain responses we did this year to address concerns from last year, in frustration, some of the young people took action against journalists, and there are ongoing investigations with regards to those events, which I want to reassure you about. The feedback post Easter Monday from the community. I spoke to various people and politicians, was incredibly positive about the police operation. And that was on the back of the events in West Belfast on the Sunday, which again passed off incredibly peacefully. So I want to acknowledge the stakeholders and community leaders who's helped us with that, and recognise the hard work of all the police officers and staff involved. With regards to, I just want to mention, because since the last meeting, we released the Operation Canova report. I've undertaken to work with the board on doing a session on the Canova report in the future. I just want to remind you of that undertaking. There may be some questions about that today. Interestingly, I was looking at the dates of the 11th of April, today's date, because yesterday I got notified that Barney O'Dowd, who was 100 years old last year, passed away in the early hours of, I think, yesterday. Barney was a victim of an atrocity on the 4th of January of 1976, where his family were attacked. I just want to pass comment and my condolences to his family. And I looked at today's date, and during the Troubles, the number of police officers that were murdered on this date was notable. And I just want to underscore the position I set out in the report, that the 21st of June should be a date that I think we set aside to recognise all these victims, on whatever side of the conflict they may come from. So many innocent victims subjected to awful events and life-changing injuries, that we remember those, and we never fail to learn the lessons of that conflict. Talking about today and policing, neighbourhood policing, I do just want to draw the board's attention to the publication of the Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland, the Ginny Inspection Report on Community Safety and Local Policing Arrangements in Northern Ireland, that again outline the reality regarding our challenges about numbers and funding and the abstractions of neighbourhood officers to provide backfills to some of the events that I've just described that we have to police. We have no separate officers for these events in the main. We have to go from our pool of staff, which means they're not doing their core functions of problem solving and reassurance in our communities. Policing demand, I mentioned at the last board meeting, but because we are in this cycle of budget setting, I just want to briefly set out, remind everybody that demand has changed significantly since I joined policing, where it was all about crime. And there's various different statistics that emerge. And I was with the Director of Public Prosecutions only last evening, and he was talking about some data from last year, around only 60% of our work seems to be related to crime at the moment. There are various different data sets available. So much of our work now is about safeguarding and look after people, and about providing an indemnity and resilience to the health service. In the report, we talk about the early data that we've looked at that shows that there are some 42,000, in excess of 42,000 concerns for safety calls per year. And we are dealing with 500 ambulance calls a month. That is a significant drain on our resources. And only the week before last, I was out at a station and two young officers had gone to a concern for safety for a lady who was vulnerable. And this is not unusual. These are the sorts of dilemmas we face. The officers went to the address, saw the lady, and this call had come about because health professionals had called us to say there was concern about this lady's welfare. The young officers who attended established the lady was fine. She wasn't subjecting herself to any harm or going out to harm anybody else. Phoned the people who did that assessment, who said, well, we're concerned for her safety. We asked what their plan was, and they said, you're our plan. We're the plan. So our officers who are trying to do all the things that we have to do are expected to sit with this lady. And we've got to find some solutions to that. And I'm going to talk about right care, right person with regards to that shortly. Funding and recruitment, given again the fact we've got new members to the board. Last month I reported that I was delighted to say we were allocated in-year funding that allowed us to break even. But the very circumstance that we have to wait until the 11th hour, the last moment, to understand that our 60 million gap can be plugged is frankly unacceptable. And we all know that, and I know you support that position. What it did mean, I'm delighted to say, because they deserve it legally and morally, is that the police officers were able to receive, they will receive in April, not yet received, their backdated pay from September that, you know, everybody on this side of the table and the board have been determined to provide them with in line with what their colleagues in England, Wales and Scotland have received. I am, however, disappointed to report that the Police Staff Award still awaits to be finally ratified to a point of being paid into their bank accounts. I know we're in an advanced state of that, but the revised environmental allowance that police staff receive that should and was agreed to be uplifted in 2019 and that I had sought to pay has still not been agreed. 2019, my predecessor agreed to pay that, and year on year, these police staff members have been let down. I have to be completely candid. I had undertaken to them that we would pay that. But understandably, the Justice Minister feels that we still can't show the affordability for that. So we're in a position again, and with the funding mechanism being determined as we speak, I appeal to the board, to the Justice Minister and to the Assembly that we get properly funded so those types of awards can be paid to our staff. Yesterday, I met with the Staff Association, NIPSA, and they confirmed to me yesterday afternoon that they're in preparations now to ballot their members for strike action because of that amount not being paid. The timelines, as I understand it, for that strike action, if a decision is taken for that to occur, would be mid-July, which obviously is a challenging time for us. As the Chief Constable, I've got one workforce. Nobody's more important than anybody else. So I would appeal for the support, the continued support of the board and the Justice Minister in seeking to achieve the budget for this organisation to pay what is a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of budgets that for an allowance that was undertaken to be provided to them in 2019. I am delighted to have welcomed 34 student officers. I watched with interest that the Garda, I think, recruited about 180 officers this week. And they also welcomed back another intake from Easter of 134 officers. I'm going to speak a bit more about that in a moment, but I promise, Chair, very briefly, this decline cannot continue. It simply cannot continue. In the backdrop of the HMIC FRS report that described the short-term nature of our funding and continued uncertainty about our future settlements means that we are severely restricted in being able to do any long-term planning, and they have signposted their concerns about the performance of this organisation. That performance they look at, by the way, doesn't generally look at the issues I've just spoken to you about. It looks at our police function. The Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, they reported again in recent weeks that the funding delivery of public services in Northern Ireland, with the cuts in police numbers due to the recent budgetary pressures, will continue to impact on PSNI's visibility and ability to respond to increased demand. Given the severe funding situation which the PSNI faces, we urge a rethink by the Treasury, the Northern Ireland Office and the Northern Ireland Executive of the PSNI's financial framework. And then finally, the NIAC report on the effect of paramilitary activity and organised crime on society in Northern Ireland, again specifically referred to the unacceptable funding position of the PSNI to deal with these key areas that are a blight on society in Northern Ireland. The good news is, despite all the financial cliff and the frankly unacceptable planning that exists, I'm pleased to report in the 12 months from the 1st of March 2023 to the 29th of February 2024, crimes recorded in Northern Ireland saw a decrease of 5.5% on the previous 12 months. Again, I think this is a testament not just to the PS9, but to the partnership work that we're doing in all of our communities. Frankly, the work that I see is remarkable. I also just wanted to quickly talk about Sanyukai. I've got Chris Todd to my left, and the whole team have done an incredible amount of work in reassuring the organisation following the data breach from last August. We were allocated £6 million to help support our staff. We've underspent that by £200,000 only. Over 90% of the officers and staff in the PS9 have been supported with that money to provide them with reassurance and support that they've probably not felt that they've had previously. So I'm delighted by the fact that we've been able to achieve that in such a pragmatic and efficient way. So it's 6 months tomorrow since I was appointed. One of the first things I recognised I needed to do, and I have to say, this hasn't been me, it's been the team around this table, but more importantly, it's been every member of police staff and officer in the organisation. The organisation has settled down after what was a uniquely difficult year. I see signs of improvement around morale. I see positive indications of what the future will hold for this organisation. But all of that needs to be on a framework of proper funding. And I'll remind this group again, very briefly, since 2010, when our budget was broadly £1 billion, our budget has gone down. It's now less than 900 million. We are an outlier in British policing. No other force has faced that. No other force in the United Kingdom. In the last 3 years alone, the Garda budget has gone up 23%, as reflected in the recruitment that I've just discussed. In public services in Northern Ireland, the health budget's gone from 3.5 billion, when our budget was 1 billion in 2010, and has now gone down, and all the work we do in the health space. The health budget's gone up to 6.6 billion. And I've read remarks that they need another billion to stand still. The education budget has gone up from 2.7 billion to 3.4 billion. We, for some reason, and I don't think this is obviously deliberate on anybody's part, we have become the poor relation in all things. But we are the glue that holds the Good Friday Agreement together, which was signed on the 10th of April, the anniversary being this week. And this decline cannot continue. In the report, the block grant since 2010-11 for Northern Ireland has grown by almost 50% to 14.2 billion in 23-24. The police budget, I'll repeat again, has fallen against all other budgets seeming to go up. So I appeal to the board's continued support, the Justice Minister's continued support, and I support her remarks that effectively describe how we just need, firstly, what we're probably entitled to from the block budget into policing, and we'd be all right. But we just need a little bit of that pie to make sure that we can continue to be the indemnity for public services and do our job in keeping the society of Northern Ireland safe. If we don't get that funding, all of the indications that have been given in the reports I've referred to will come to fruition. I have got an amazing workforce. They are superheroes, but they are not machines. So we need to ensure that during this cycle of funding decisions, that we get the proper money we need to resource this organisation. And we need circa 8,000 police officers and circa 3,000 police staff. And that's the leap-wise work that I've shared with this board and I've written to all the various ministers about. And I'll be writing again next week to remind them of that position. And I know there's no individual blame here, and I know there's huge competing demands for public services, and I know we think we've got £1 billion for a £3 billion demand, if you like, but we just need to make sure this organisation finally gets funded to the level that it needs. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief Constable.